Goons try to rip the mentor's shirt in class. She teaches them a lesson. Willow Sterling straightened her plain grey cardigan, pausing before entering McKinley Academy in Portland. Her appearance was unassuming. Medium height, auburn hair in a simple braid, simple spectacles, and a slight build that gave an impression of frailty. Her simple clothes underscored her reserved demeanor. What her fellow instructors didn't realize was that underneath her ordinary look resided 8 years of extensive Aikido training. Willow had achieved her third-degree black belt in Yoshinkan Aikido and cultivated formidable grappling abilities in Judo at Portland's finest martial arts school. She could splinter wood with her open palm, but maintained her two existences separate. Guiding young minds was her genuine calling. McKinley Academy's beige stucco structures encompassed 42 classrooms. Willow's classroom, 301A, was situated toward the center of the third-floor corridor, a bit removed from the more active areas where senior teachers held sway. Her initial week at McKinley commenced with reserved hopefulness. Students filed into her fourth-period world literature course, satchels overflowing with textbooks they rarely consulted. "Greetings, everyone," Willow murmured. "Please get out your editions of Pride and Prejudice. We will be examining Chapter 5 today." A suppressed chuckle arose from the back corner where Jasper Thornton had established his personal domain. Statuesque and beefy from varsity wrestling, Jasper dominated attention through sheer size and an attitude that stemmed from being the superintendent's son. His dark hair was meticulously styled, and costly designer items distinguished him from the other students. Accompanying him were Finn O'Connell, a lean lacrosse player with watchful eyes, and Gage Faulkner, whose family controlled the county's leading real estate agency. "Hey, Miss Sterling!" Jasper shouted, intentionally butchering her name as Sperling. "Why do we have to read this outdated crap? Nobody cares about some old lady's book." Several students squirmed uncomfortably in their chairs, sensing the challenge in his tone. Willow had encountered similar situations during her teaching internship, but something about Jasper's sneer indicated this was just the opening shot. "Literature allows us to explore different viewpoints and historical periods," she answered quietly, turning to record the day's objectives on the dry erase board. "Jane Austen's work explores themes that are still relevant in our time." "Whatever," Finn added, drawing approving glances from his companions. "My mum says teachers just pick boring junk to annoy us, says real learning happens outside of school." Willow kept writing, refusing to rise to the bait. She had discovered during her Aikido training that the foremost rule of engagement was to avoid it if possible. Calm and restraint often proved more effective than instant retaliation. The pattern went on for days. Jasper would show up late, letting the door slam shut. He broke up lessons with loud sighs and rude remarks, while Finn and Gage reinforced every disturbance. "Miss Sterling," Gage proclaimed during reading, "I think something's wrong with my chair." He slammed his notebook against the plastic surface, creating a constant rhythm that disrupted everyone's concentration. "Please stop," Willow requested softly. "Others are trying to read." "Oh, my bad, teach," Gage replied with false sincerity. "Didn't realize you were so sensitive. Maybe you need to get some headphones." Other students observed these interactions with intense interest. A few looked sympathetic, notably Bethany Ramirez, a bright student who sat in the front and often stayed after class to discuss literature. Others seemed amused, while a few appeared uncomfortable but hesitant to get involved. Mr. Ethan Hayes, the music director next door, had noticed Willow during faculty gatherings. His gentle gaze and sincere smile made her heart skip a beat. They had shared tea twice, discussing curriculum ideas and their shared interest in kayaking on the Willamette River. Willow treasured these conversations and the way Ethan listened without judgment. The harassment intensified during the second week. Jasper rearranged seats, creating obstructions that forced Willow to weave a maze to reach the whiteboard. He would accidentally drop pencils when she spoke, creating loud noises that made her flinch. Once, he left a vulgar doodle on the whiteboard depicting a stick figure labeled instructor being attacked by larger figures labeled pupils. The genuine degradation started during a lesson on metaphors. Willow was explaining the importance of the river as a symbol when Jasper raised his hand with excessive politeness. "I was wondering if you could illustrate how a river flows," he said with contrived innocence. "For visual learners like myself." "I believe the textual description is sufficient," Willow replied, sensing a setup. "Oh, come on, teach," Finn added. "Show us how it meanders." The class erupted in shouts of "Demonstrate, demonstrate," led by Gage's rhythmic stomping. Willow felt her face flush as 30 pairs of eyes fixed on her, waiting to see if she would give in to their combined coercion. "We will proceed to the next chapter," she stated firmly, but her authority had been weakened. The students sensed weakness, and Jasper grinned like a predator who had spotted vulnerable prey. The following day presented a new ordeal. Jasper had somehow acquired her personal mobile phone number and started sending text messages during class. Her phone would vibrate with messages like, "Your droning is putting me to sleep," and "When will this torment cease?" Every alert caused her to glance at her desk, provoking knowing glances from his crew. During the lunch break, she spoke with the assistant principal, but Ms. Thompson seemed more concerned with preserving decorum than addressing the underlying problem. "Have you tried connecting with these students?" Ms. Thompson asked, not looking up from her computer. "Maybe you could use more current examples." Willow left feeling even more alone. The administration's suggestion that she appease her tormentors rather than address their behavior sent a clear signal about where assistance would come from. Nowhere. The final straw came on a Friday afternoon during fifth period. Autumn sunlight streamed through windows as Willow attempted to guide a discussion about ethical fortitude in literature. The irony was not lost on her. "Can anyone offer an example of ethical fortitude from your own life?" she asked. Jasper's hand shot up. "Yeah, I got one. Sometimes it takes fortitude to tell a teacher when they're doing a terrible job." The class went silent. Even Bethany looked up with worry. "That's not really what I meant," Willow said gently. "No, listen," Jasper continued, standing up with theatrical flair. "Like, it takes real guts to tell someone they're boring, right?" He began walking toward the front, and Willow instinctively stepped backward. Everyone noticed. Her retreat sent excitement through the class as they realized they were watching something unprecedented. "For example," Jasper continued, now only 2 feet from her, "someone might have the fortitude to say that this class is a complete waste of time and that you're probably the worst teacher in the entire school." Finn and Gage were on their feet now, forming a half circle around her desk. Other students remained seated, but craned their necks to see better, phones already filming what they sensed would be a viral moment. "Please return to your seats," Willow said, her voice finally displaying strain. "Or someone might have the fortitude," Jasper said, stepping closer, "to point out that your outfit looks like it came from a charity shop bargain bin." His friends cackled cruelly. Willow felt her face burning as she realized Ethan Hayes might hear the commotion next door. The idea of him witnessing her humiliation was nearly unbearable. "That's enough," she said more firmly, but her voice wavered. "Is it really, though?" Jasper asked, his tone becoming menacing, "because I think someone with real fortitude might even test just how much a person can take before they break." Before she could react, his hand shot out and grabbed the neckline of her grey cardigan. The soft material wasn't chosen for strength, and the sudden movement caused her to stumble backward against the whiteboard. "Let go of me," she said, her voice steady despite adrenaline now surging through her veins. "What if I don't want to?" Jasper replied, his grip tightening. "What if I think it might be interesting to see what happens when someone fights back?" The classroom held its breath as his fingers started pulling at the delicate fabric. Willow could hear the slight ripping sound as seams stretched. In her peripheral vision, she saw students holding up phones, recording what they assumed would be her utter defeat. But something had shifted in Willow's demeanor. Her breathing had changed from shallow panic to the deep, controlled rhythm she had practiced thousands of times in the dojo. Her posture, previously defensive and retreating, became balanced and centered. 8 years of training had conditioned her body to respond to physical threats with calm precision rather than fear. "I said let go of me," she repeated, and this time her voice carried an intensity that made several students look up from their phones. Jasper either didn't notice the change or chose to ignore it. He was too invested in his public display of dominance to recognize the danger he had stumbled into. "Make me," he said, giving her cardigan another sharp tug that tore the fabric at the shoulder seam. The sound of ripping cloth was the last provocation. Willow's left hand moved with incredible speed, seizing Jasper's wrist in a grip that instantly cut off circulation to his fingers. Simultaneously, her right hand struck his elbow at exactly the angle needed to break his hold on her clothing. The technique was called a kote geishi in Yoshinkan Aikido, and Willow executed it perfectly. Jasper's eyes widened in shock as his hand went numb and his arm was twisted behind his back in one smooth motion. Before he could react, she had stepped to his side and used his own momentum to guide him face first against the whiteboard. "What the hell?" Finn yelled, starting forward to assist his friend. Willow's head turned toward him with a look that stopped him cold. There was no anger in her expression, only a calm calculation that suggested she was 3 steps ahead of any move he might make. "I wouldn't," she said simply, and something in her tone convinced him to freeze in place. Jasper struggled against the hold, but every movement only tightened Willow's control. She had positioned his arm at the perfect angle to cause maximum discomfort without actual injury, a technique designed to subdue without permanently harming. "This is how this works," she said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the suddenly silent classroom. "You can apologize for grabbing me and tearing my shirt, or I can demonstrate some other techniques I learned during my 8 years of Aikido training." The revelation hit the room like a thunderbolt. Students who had been recording suddenly found themselves witnessing something far different from what they had anticipated. Instead of a helpless teacher being humiliated, they were watching a trained martial artist exercising remarkable restraint. "You're crazy," Jasper gasped, his face pressed against the board. "No," Willow replied calmly. "I'm someone who chose to become a teacher because I believe in education and respect. But I'm also someone who won't be physically assaulted in my own classroom." Gage made the mistake of trying to circle behind her while she was focused on Jasper. Willow's peripheral vision, honed by years of sparring against multiple opponents, caught the movement instantly. Without releasing her hold on Jasper, she pivoted and delivered a precise side kick that caught Gage in the ribcage, doubling him over and sending him stumbling backward into a row of desks. The technique was called a yoko-geri in karate, and Willow had practiced it thousands of times against heavy bags and impact shields. She had pulled the kick significantly, using just enough force to wind him without causing lasting damage. "Anyone else?" she asked, her eyes scanning the room with the calm confidence of someone completely in control of the situation. The classroom had descended into total silence. Students who had been laughing moments earlier now stared in wide-eyed amazement at their transformed teacher. Phones continued recording, but the narrative had completely shifted from victim-shaming to something approaching awe. "Here's what's going to happen," Willow announced, still maintaining her hold on Jasper. "You're going to apologize for touching me without permission and for destroying my property. Then you are going to sit down and participate in this class like the intelligent young man I know you can be." "This is assault," Jasper wheezed, though his protest lacked conviction. "No," Willow corrected. "Assault is what you did when you grabbed my clothing against my will. This is self-defense, and I have 30 witnesses who can testify that I used the minimum force necessary to protect myself." She was right, and everyone in the room knew it. The phone recordings would show clearly that she had only acted after being physically grabbed, and that her response, while surprising, had been precisely calibrated to stop the threat without causing unnecessary harm. "I am going to release you now," she continued, "and you are going to return to your seat. If you choose to escalate this situation further, I will be happy to demonstrate some of the pinning techniques I learned in judo. Some of them are quite uncomfortable." Slowly, she released the pressure on his arm and stepped back, giving him space to move while remaining ready to react if necessary. Jasper straightened up, rubbing his wrist and staring at her with a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. The door flew open as Ethan Hayes rushed in, having heard the commotion from next door. He took in the scene, Willow standing calmly in the center of the room, Jasper rubbing his arm, Gage still catching his breath, and 30 students staring in stunned silence. "Is everything all right in here?" he asked, his eyes immediately finding Willow's torn cardigan and concerned expression. "Everything is fine now," she replied, smoothing down her hair and adjusting her torn clothing with dignity. "We were just having a discussion about personal boundaries and respect." Ethan's athletic background allowed him to quickly assess what had happened. The way Willow carried herself, the positioning of the students, and the atmosphere in the room told a clear story. His expression shifted from concern to something approaching admiration as he realized what he had missed. "Well," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "it sounds like an important lesson. I will let you get back to it." As he left, Willow heard him chuckling softly in the hallway. The sound made her heart flutter despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "Now then," she said, turning back to her class, "who can tell me about a character in literature who had to find the courage to stand up for themselves?" Bethany's hand shot up immediately. "Elizabeth Bennet," she said, her voice filled with new respect. "She stood up for what she believed in, even when everyone was against her." "Excellent example," Willow replied, settling back into her teaching rhythm as if nothing unusual had happened. "What made her courage particularly noteworthy?" The class discussion that followed was the most engaged she had experienced since arriving at McKinley Academy. Students who had never participated before raised their hands with thoughtful questions and observations. Even Finn, though still wary, contributed a surprisingly insightful comment about moral integrity. Jasper remained silent for the rest of the period, but he didn't cause any disruptions. He sat in his seat, occasionally touching his wrist and shooting glances at Willow with what appeared to be genuine curiosity rather than hostility. When the bell rang, students filed out in unusual quiet, many of them looking back at their teacher with new eyes. The phone recordings were already being shared, but the narrative was not what Jasper had intended. Instead of a humiliated teacher, they showed a competent professional defending herself with skill and restraint. Bethany lingered after the others had left, approaching Willow's desk with obvious concern. "Miss Sterling, are you okay?" she asked. That was amazing. I had no idea you knew martial arts." "I am fine, thank you," Willow replied, examining the tear in her cardigan. "And yes, I have been training for several years. It is a pastime I don't typically discuss at work. Will you get in trouble for what happened?" Willow considered the question carefully. "I defended myself against a physical assault using reasonable force. The recordings will show that clearly. If anything, this might finally get the administration's attention about what has been happening in this classroom." Word spread through McKinley Academy faster than weekend gossip. By day's end, several colleagues expressed support for her handling of the situation. Ms. Thompson even acknowledged that sometimes students need to understand actions have repercussions. Monday brought changed classroom dynamics. Jasper arrived on time and took his seat without fanfare. When Willow began the lesson, he opened his textbook and followed along. The change wasn't dramatic, but the hostility had disappeared entirely. During lunch, he approached her desk while she graded papers. "Miss Sterling," he said quietly, "I wanted to apologize for what happened Friday. I was completely wrong." She studied his face for sincerity, but found none. "Thank you, Jasper. I appreciate that. I thought teachers were just spineless adults who couldn't do anything about troublemakers." "Most teachers could do quite a lot," Willow replied gently. "We choose not to because we believe in education and positive reinforcement, but that doesn't mean we are helpless." Understanding passed across his features. "How long have you been training in martial arts?" 8 years. I started in college for self-assurance. It became much more. Why didn't you mention it before?" "Because I wanted to be known as a good teacher, not as someone who could fight. What happened Friday was self-preservation, not a spectacle. For what it is worth, you are a good teacher. I was just too dumb to realize it." The conversation marked a turning point. Finn and Gage, taking cues from their leader, also adjusted their behavior. The disruptions ceased and real learning began. Ethan Hayes had been watching these developments with growing interest. His respect for Willow deepened after witnessing how she handled the crisis with both strength and wisdom. Their conversations became more frequent and personal. "I have to admit," he said during tea, "I was impressed by your technique. That wrist lock was textbook perfect." Willow blushed. "You are familiar with martial arts?" "I boxed in college and still train occasionally. I recognize the professionalism in how you handled that situation. You could have really injured him." "That was never the intent," she said firmly. "I just needed him to understand that boundaries exist and have consequences." The transformation extended beyond her classroom. Other students began treating Willow with respect that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition of her competence and integrity. She hadn't become a bully, she had simply established that she wouldn't tolerate being bullied. 3 weeks later, Superintendent Thornton, Jasper's father, called her aside. "We have reviewed the recordings thoroughly. Your response was completely appropriate and professionally handled. My son needed that reality check. His grades are improving, and his attitude has changed dramatically. You taught him that actions have consequences with remarkable skill." Spring semester brought new possibilities. Willow's reputation as both an outstanding educator and someone not to be trifled with had spread throughout the school. Students sought her guidance, recognizing her as someone who possessed both wisdom and strength. Jasper had become one of her most improved students. His essay on ethical fortitude was among the best she had received. "I wrote about you," he admitted when she returned the graded paper with a B+. "About me. About how it takes real fortitude to be patient with people who don't deserve it, but also to stand up for yourself when patience is no longer enough. You could have gotten me expelled, but you chose to teach me instead." As the school year drew to a close, Willow reflected on her journey from that first anxious morning to her current position as one of McKinley Academy's most admired educators. She had learned that standing up for herself didn't require abandoning her principles or becoming someone she wasn't proud of. Ethan Hayes had become a constant presence in her life, their relationship evolving from professional friendship to genuine partnership. He admired her strength while appreciating her compassion. On the last day of school, Jasper stopped by her classroom one final time. "Miss Sterling, you changed how I think about things. My dad always taught me that being strong meant pushing people around, but you showed me that real strength is knowing when not to push and when to push back. What will you remember most about this year?" He thought for a moment. "That you could have crushed me that day, but you chose to help me instead. That is the kind of person I want to be. Someone who has the power to harm people, but chooses to help them instead." As summer break began, Willow packed up her classroom with satisfaction she had never experienced before. She had faced her greatest professional challenge and emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. The torn cardigan still hung in her closet at home, a reminder of the day she learned that being gentle didn't mean being helpless, and that standing up for yourself was not only acceptable, but necessary. She had found the perfect balance between strength and compassion, authority and kindness, self-preservation and restraint. Most importantly, she had discovered that true courage wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about acting with integrity and purpose, even when fear was present. That lesson had transformed not just her classroom, but her entire understanding of what it meant to be both strong and good in a world that sometimes demanded both qualities at once.